Well, welcome everyone to the first AIS Research Exchange. This is going to be a series of conversations, both with selected panelists and among yourselves in the audience. So we bring this to you as a benefit of your AIS membership. And if you are an AIS member, I encourage you to explore all the wonderful things that we have available for you. And if you're not an AIS member, I encourage you to join so you can get access to a whole bunch of resources. These research exchange talks are going to be free and open to anyone because we provide these as a contribution to the IS community as a whole. So let me start with the first conversation, which is about how to do good reviews and how to get noticed in the IS field. And we are privileged today to have two outstanding speakers. First, let me introduce Sue Brown, who is the APS professor and serves as the department head of MIS at the University of Arizona. She has over 100 publications. She's served on a number of editorial boards, and she's received a bunch of awards for research and reviewing an AE work. I'm also delighted to introduce Rajiv Kohli, who is the John N. Dalton Professor of Business and the Raymond A. Mason School of Business at William & Mary. He serves as our VP of Publications and also as a Senior Editor for Information Systems Research. So the way we're going to run the session today is I'm going to serve as moderator. I'm Alan Dennis, past president of AIS. So I've had the privilege to know Sue and Rajiv for a long, long time, although they're much younger than I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a bunch of questions that I've collected from a bunch of different people. And I'm also going to ask you in the audience to submit your questions as well. What you'll see on the panel on the right of your screen is a tab that says Q&A. So if you have questions that you would like Rajiv and Sue to talk about, please enter them in there. So we'll have a conversation with Rajiv and Sue for maybe about a half an hour, maybe a little longer. We'll see what questions we get from the audience. And then we're going to give you a chance to network with the people sitting at your table so that you can talk about reviewing and how to get noticed in the community. And then as we get close to the end of the hour, I'll draw us back up on stage. We'll ask Sue and Rajiv for some closing comments, and then we'll end the formal program. But of course, you're welcome to stick around in Remo at your table or moving to other tables after the event ends. Just like if we were to have an in-person conference when the session ends, you're welcome to stick around the room and talk to people that you see. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to start by posing just a very general question, which is, what is a good review? And Rajiv, do you want to lead us off with that?
Sure. Thank you, Alan, for moderating this, and thank you all for joining us. So let me just first say that if you are asked to review, think of that as an honor and a privilege. What it means is that the community, the editors, have thought of you and your abilities as a scholar and have asked you to review. So what is a good review? So I will divide it into two parts. The first is a good review is one that helps the associate editor with whom a reviewer is generally interacting with to evaluate the accuracy of the findings that are in the paper and also the contribution of the paper to the stream of conversation to that research. The second part that I would say for a good review is one that is very clear in guiding the authors. So this part is focused towards the authors. So guide the authors on how they can improve or sharpen their message through, say, additional literature review, to improving the methodology, analytical techniques, or better packaging of the paper. So,
okay. Thanks, Rajiv, and thank you, Alan, and thank you everybody for being here today. Reviewing is something that I'm very passionate about, so I am delighted to be here to be talking about it. In terms of a good review, I want to echo what Rajiv said, this communication. It is a communication tool. But I want you to think about a good review in terms of it being the review you would have liked to have received. So, and I don't mean that it's an acceptance when I say that, because we all like to have our papers accepted. But what I mean is that the tone of the review is such that you're open to receiving the feedback, that it's written in a way that it communicates what the issues might be and how you might go about correcting them. It also identifies at least one thing that you like about the paper. To me, that's very important, and it can set the stage for the author being more open to receiving the rest of the feedback. Another thing that I would say about a good review is that it's not longer than the paper. Okay. When I am working with my students and first-time reviewers, I tell them, 3 pages is probably the sweet spot. It gives you an opportunity to identify what you like about the paper, make some recommendations for how it could be improved, including identifying issues, as well as identifying ways that they can be corrected. So, it doesn't need to be that long. And then finally, what I would say, in many of our systems, you have an opportunity to put in private comments to the editors. Please make sure that your comments, your private comments, are consistent with those in the review. Okay, that's usually an indicator that maybe you haven't done a good review. You have to say something completely opposite in the private comments. Now, you don't want to tell authors that you think their paper doesn't have a chance using those words in the review. You can say that in the editor's report, but your review should not then say, oh, this is one of the best papers I've ever read. Okay, so that consistency of messaging is very important as well.
Oh, that's interesting that you both picked up on communication as the real purpose of the review, because whenever I sit down to write a review, I always imagine myself sitting around a table with the author with a cup of coffee or my favorite beverage and saying to the author, this is a really interesting paper. Here's what I see in it. So it is all about communicating an opinion, expert opinion, on a paper. So I like that framing. So when you sit down to review a paper, how do you do it? What's the process that you use to go through and do a review? And Sue, do you want to start this one?
Sure. I like to layer. That's how I write, and it's how I review. So I'll start when I get a paper, do a quick read of the paper, and write down comments as I'm going through it, just to see, what hits me immediately. And then I'll put the paper away and come back and read it again in much more depth along with those comments to see, was that really a thing, or was it just because I did a quick read? And that's the point when I'm going through it in much more depth. If there are a citation or two that are really central to the paper, then I will go look them up if I'm not familiar with them, just to make sure that I understand how they're being used in the paper. And so, I go through it a couple of times at least. And then the one thing that I have always done throughout my entire career and continue it to this day is to sleep on a review. I never finish the review and submit it immediately. And many times I have gotten up the next day, read through it, and made edits, again, to the tone and making sure that things are being phrased in a way that communicates to the editors and the authors. Rajiv?
Thank you, Sue. So just to piggyback on what Alan mentioned, my reviews also are in a conversational tone, as if I'm having a conversation with the authors. So I don't say the authors did this. I just say you did this, or you should do that. So any suggestions are directly towards the authors. In terms of the process that I follow, I allocate time for review. It's not something I want to do the night before it's due. So and sometimes, we are crunched for time. So I put it on my calendar. I usually put it on my calendar 3 or 4 days before it's due. But I try to start it before that and allocate time as if I was in a meeting to read the paper. I like to print it out. People have different preferences. I like to print it out. And with a pen, I sit down and good old-fashioned way, I take notes on the paper. Like Sue said, I also let it simmer. So after I've taken notes, the next day I'll come back and start to type those notes and make edits to those notes. But one of the things I do when I first get the paper, I screen the paper to quickly get a sense of what is this paper about. So just wrap my head around the topic and how they are doing. And then when I take notes, they're a little bit more detailed. I also think about where I can add value to the paper. And there are certain places I cannot add value. Other places I do add value. For each critique that I have for a paper, I try to give the authors a suggestion, or sometimes two, on how they might resolve that. So that's something that I say to myself, that if I'm going to be critical of something, I am also going to give them some suggestions on how to resolve that. If I cannot, I say it, but I try to. But more importantly, I'll share with you what I don't do, or don't want to do, or don't want to see done in a review of my paper. I never compare the paper I'm reviewing with a paper that I submitted that was rejected. And what that means is I don't let the fact that my paper that was rejected was much better quality than this. So there is no way I should recommend revise and resubmit or acceptance of this paper. Do not do that, because that is just not good for any paper that you are reviewing. I do not hide behind anonymity and be impolite or accusatory or mean-spirited, because it's very easy to do, because nobody knows you. Your name's not on there. I don't imply in my reviews that this paper can go to a lower quality journal, or it's not worthy of JAIS or ISR or MISQ. That just makes the authors feel very bad, as if we are this club that you can't be a part of. I also try not to make comments about fit with the journal. I assume that if the senior editor and the associate editor has sent this paper to me, they have assessed the fit of the paper with the journal. Alan, back to you.
Yeah, so
can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, jump in.
The anonymity thing, I want to echo that. I have always tried, back in the day when I first started writing reviews, there was an opportunity and a probability that people would find out who the reviewer was if you didn't edit all the properties in your document. And so I've always tried to write my review so that if the author found out somehow that I was the reviewer, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with them about exactly what was in my review. And I think that's really important. That's striking the right tone, to get back to that tone issue. So I really want to echo that. Sorry.
No worries. So this makes me think of all kinds of other questions, but I have to digress and tell a story. I really like the comment about tone, because I got a review 2 or 3 years ago from a reviewer that started with, "I know you're a doctoral student because you don't know how to write. Let me give you advice. In time, you'll learn how to write." And I'm thinking, at this point, I really want to say who it is. Anyway, the story gets even better as it goes on. We revised it and got an equally inappropriate comment that was personally targeted back.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's a really good thing to remember, is you're talking to a colleague. So make sure your comments are professional and expert, but also remember the tone, and don't take things personally. I really like the idea both of you have said. You do the review in at least 2 parts. So you said you sleep on it. Rajiv, you said you schedule time. reviews take a long time. And I know I've talked to some junior scholars and these senior scholars where they talk about how long it takes them to do a review. So as I hear you talking about that, Rajiv, putting time on your calendar, how much time do you put on your calendar to do that first read? I'm just curious, how long do you spend on the review?
Yeah, so I will allocate a good part of the afternoon. So 2-3 hours because I'm going page by page and taking notes. But I do screen it usually when I get the paper to see what this paper is about and if I'm the appropriate reviewer for it and what are my limitations.
Right. That first screen is probably, for me, it's about an hour maybe just to go through it, a quick make notes. But then sitting down and doing the really in-depth nitty-gritty part of the review, good about 3-4 hours, depending on, it really depends on the paper. If it's an area that I'm intimately familiar with, then it goes a lot quicker. If it's something that's outside what I know, it's going to take a little bit longer. But those are often the more interesting ones to me because it's something that I'm not completely immersed in.
So I want to add something more, and this is not very often that this happens, but you might find in doing a review reference to an article or a book that you're not familiar with, but that seems to be one of the core pillars of the author's argument. So at one time I was doing a review and there was this book that they kept referring to in which there was this evolutionary biology reference. Now I have a biology background, but I had not read that book. I called the library, they had the book, I went and picked it up. It was not a very long book, it was a thin book. I read the book overnight and then changed my mind the next day after reading it, because at first I said, what does IS have to do with evolutionary biology? But when I read the book, I realized that there was something that we could draw upon, and that changed the way I reviewed, and that reflected in my report. So once in a while, you will have to do extra work. So those 2-3 hours that Sue and I just mentioned may become 2 or 3 days where you spend 2-3 hours each.
Yeah, I think it's important to schedule that reviewing time. Just to say, look, I'm committed to doing reviews. I'm going to schedule a few hours a week to do them. And if you get asked to do a review, then you've got the time set aside. And if you don't, it's bonus research time. So it never hurts to schedule the time.
I see one of the questions from the audience talks about how do we work with the department head to get, quote, credit, if you will, for doing reviews. We all do reviews. It's part of our job responsibilities. Some of us enjoy that, some of us don't. So let me put you on the spot, Sue, as the department head, and say, how do we encourage our department chairs just to recognize that this is an important part of what we do, and I'll say get credit for the service that we do to the discipline? Well,
I think you have to look at reviewing from multiple perspectives. And this isn't a waffly department head response, but this is a personal response that, we review for multiple reasons. It's not just a check a box, right? It's, you want to network, you want to get involved with the community, you want to see what research is coming out and what other people are working on so that you can get exposed to other ideas as well as other references, and evolutionary biology is an example. And so you're doing this reviewing to build your career, which you can take with you wherever you want to go, right? So that's for you. Now, in terms of the department head, I would imagine, at least we do, is we recognize reviewing as an important part of external service. And certainly as you progress in the pre-tenure years, we would expect you to be doing it. And then as you think about again, it comes back to your personal career progression. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, that you can then become an editor if you so desire, and you can move up the ranks, so to speak, which is good for your career, because remember, part of the tenure process and promotion process is getting external letters. Well, how do you get those letters? You get those letters because people know you from your research and from your community service. So I guess I it is kind of waffly department head answer. Don't expect your department head to check a box for you about doing this, because you're really doing it for your career. You should be checking the box for yourself, but that's my.
Yeah, so
Rajiv,
I can't add much more to what Sue said, both as a scholar and a department chair. What I would say is I always list on my annual report to the dean's office my reviewing activities, my editorial activities, and as Sue said, it really is a professional development for us in addition to service. We do, as faculty, get 20% of our time for professional development, for research, and so on. So you may want to count this part of that, because this is what really helps you see what the discipline is doing. I think one of the beauties of doing reviews is that you get to see research before it's published, but more importantly, you get to see research that did not get published. And then you know why, because you see the reports of all the other reviewers also when you get the packet back from the senior editor. Spend some time reading other reviewers' comments as well. So that helps you improve your own research and your own writing.
So let me jump in, and I see a question there that I'm going to answer. Is it appropriate to include reviews on a CV? Yes, at the journal level. So at Indiana, when folks go up for tenure, we expect assistant professors to have reviewing experience, just because that shows they're a member of the community. They have contributed to the development of scholarship. So yes, it's work, but as Sue and Rajiv point out, think of this as your opportunity to shape future research and to help your colleagues do better research. I had one question earlier that I think probably fits here, and then we can talk about networking and expanding your career. So one of the questions that I got asked earlier was about conflict of interest. When editors pick reviewers to review papers, we try to avoid picking people who have conflicts of interest. But let's suppose you've agreed to review a paper, and in that initial screen that you've mentioned, you realize, oh, wait, I think I know who this is, and I have a conflict of interest. What do you do at that point? Because you've already said, yeah, I'm going to review. What do you do?
So let me take that, Alan. That's a very tricky situation to be in. And at times, one would rationalize and say, well, it's anonymous. I'm not supposed to know this. So I know this, but nobody knows that I know this. Don't rationalize that. If you have the slightest doubt, contact the associate editor who assigned that paper to you and share with him or her your concern, even if you are not sure. Now, if you've heard that presentation, that paper being presented at a conference, and you know who the authors are, that's okay. But if you know the authors because either they are your co-authors or colleagues that you have commented on the paper, and you feel that it may be potential. So there's a difference between a conflict of interest and potential conflict of interest. I try to emphasize even the potential of conflict of interest. And if that's the case, then the old adage, sunlight is the best disinfectant, meaning just put it out in the open, let the editors share that with the editors, let the editors tell you what to do next.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's better in that case to share the information with the editors. I had a situation where I was handling a paper at one journal and invited to review a paper at another journal, and they were clearly from the same authors, similar study. And so I ended up having to, escalate that to both editors and chiefs. But it's something even similar that you reviewed a paper at one journal and then it was rejected, and then you end up getting it at another journal as a reviewer. You don't know who the authors are. And the community is so small that can easily happen. It's very important to share with the editor. Some editors will say, go ahead and move forward with it. And other editors will say, yeah, we'll find somebody new. We want fresh eyes. But let the editors make the decision.
Yeah, and that conflict of interest, sometimes a conflict of interest light is a version of being unbiased or being able to be unbiased. So the example that Sue just mentioned, where you may not have a conflict, but you've seen that paper before and you have an opinion. So you may be biased one way or the other. And that is also a good place to let the editors know that I've seen this paper, I have a certain opinion, would you still like me to review? And if the editors say, go ahead, then go ahead and review that. Just to add my own example, I did get a paper one time that I thought, again, I'm still not sure to this day, I thought might be one of my colleagues. If you moved recently, the editors may not know, they may still think of you at the previous institution. And if you moved and that person happens to be at your current institution, then this can happen. And so let the editors know if you have doubt. And the editors might come back and say, fine. In my case, they did. And they said, go ahead, you let us know. And to this day, they did not tell me whether that was the case or not. But I struggled with it initially. I must say that it was not easy for me because I felt like, what if that's not the case? I'm wrong. And why should I just make it an issue if it's not an issue?
Yeah. So this highlights the importance of doing that quick screen shortly after you receive the paper. Because if you're waiting until the day before it's due and you discover this, then now you've messed up the entire review cycle for everybody. So do that quick screen early.
So that's really good advice. When you first accept a review, make some time very soon after to read the paper and make sure that there's no issues. And if you have a doubt, if you are not sure about conflict of interest, ask the editor. That's the job of the editor, is to make decisions like that. Your role is to raise questions. I see a bunch of questions in the chat. Let me jump around, or in the Q&A. Let me jump around a little bit. How do people learn to be good reviewers? Sue, do you want to jump on that one? Because I know you've got an initiative on that.
I got to go to the reviewing workshops. I think that MIS Quarterly has a reviewing workshop, and I know that AIS is moving in that direction. I think it's really important to do that. And it does a couple things. It gets you exposed to how to do it. You get to see good reviews, but also it helps you to connect with people and to connect with editors who could then ultimately invite you to be a reviewer. Volunteer for conferences. AIS and ICIS, as examples that I'm familiar with, I'm sure Paxis and ESIS have the same thing, have hundreds of submissions. Well, hundreds times 2 or 3 adds up pretty rapidly. And so we're always in need of people to do reviews at conferences. And so that's a great place to start. The other thing that I would suggest is talk to your advisor or a senior scholar and ask them if it would be possible to do a shadow review, so that you could see what they do and then they could give you feedback on what you do. And I've done that with some students and it's turned out pretty well.
So I'd like to say that to be a good reviewer and to do a good review means that you deliver timely, thoughtful reviews consistently. And let me just also warn you here that when you do that, you will get more reviews to do. That's just the price you pay for doing good work. You get more work, and that's okay. Don't be the one that does not do a good job and nobody wants to send them papers to review. The other thing I would like to add is, as you're doing your reviews, be known for something, whether it's methodology, whether it's a theory base, whether it's an industry that you come from, that you specialize in, so that the editors know your specialization and they can send you appropriate papers for you to review. And that way, that sets you up for moving up from reviewers to editors' roles. Offer to participate in conferences. As Sue just mentioned, we have hundreds of papers that have to be reviewed in conferences. So that's a good place to start. They are usually shorter papers. They are papers from a diversity of topics. I would also advise you to, if you're not yet a reviewer or early in your reviewing stage, to adopt a mentor, maybe 2 mentors that you can talk to, whether it's your advisor, your senior co-author, people work with, and bounce off ideas with them, and even let them give you feedback on what a good quality review from their perspective looks like. So there are a number of ways you can start engaging yourself into the process. And one of the things Sue touched upon, and I'll steal one of her ideas, is to contact the associate editors, because they are the ones who assign papers to reviewers. So senior editors, and is a great idea. Contact the associate editors, and a practical way to do that is just go to journal, the editorial board, see if you can find those that are free to do, and then contact them and specific about, are you skilled in reviewing you, and there you can talk about either methodology or a theory-based things that I mentioned earlier, so that they know what kind of paper they should send to you. Don't just send an email saying I'm interested in reviewing. Be more specific. That way they can keep you in mind when there is a paper that suits you.
Very good advice. So we've talked a lot about the reviewing process and how to do a good review. Let's turn a little bit to using this to get networked, because we all want to be known in the field. We want to make connections. We want to meet our colleagues. So how do I go about networking and becoming known? And I mean, I can save this question for later, or you can go for it now. One of the questions from the audience is, how do editors choose reviewers to move up to associate editors? So what are editors looking at? So the whole idea here is, how do I use reviewing as a way to get better known in the community? And Sue, do you want to
Sure.
take that one
first? Let me echo what Rajiv said about doing high quality, timely, really good reviews consistently. That's how you get known once you're reviewing, right? So once you've made it into the reviewing ranks, do a good job and do it consistently, and that will get you noticed and help to move you up. But you've got to get in the door, and we talked a little bit about that. But this point that Rajiv made about contacting the AEs. At MISQ and ISR, the AEs are typically at least making the recommendation for who the reviewers are. Depending on who the SE is, they're going to work with them a little bit. But the AEs are really the ones who are making that contact with the reviewers. So reaching out to the AEs, letting them know what your interests are, your expertise, the kinds of papers that you are ready, willing, and able to review. But remember, the minute you make that contact, you better be prepared to get reviews, accept reviews, and do good reviews. Okay, so make sure that you're ready for that before you extend that. As you present at conferences or get papers published, people will start to know you, and then they will pick up on, hey, I saw this presentation by this person on this topic. Now I'm going to invite them to come and do a review. So that's a way to break into the ranks. But really, the way to move up, do good reviews, do them on time, do it consistently.
So I'll answer the question that you got in the Q&A, Alan, about how do you move up from reviewer to more senior editorial roles. I'll just go back to what I said. If you do good reviews, if you are known for something, then the editors will keep you in mind. Now, I should also add that the process of appointing associate editors from good reviewers sometimes takes longer than you would like. You might say, I've been reviewing for quite some time, and I'm ready to be an associate editor. The choice of associate editor depends on a number of things, such as people retiring or leaving the board, and their expertise. So once you are associate editor ready, it might take a year or two when there is an opening in your area. And because you are known for something, when there is either the journal gets a lot more papers in that area, they might appoint a second or a third associate editor in that topic, or when an associate editor retires in that area, your turn will come. But there is no magic to it, just doing good work, being recognized for something, and making sure sometimes you help out the associate editors. There are times when we need very quick reviews. I won't go through the circumstances when that might happen. And some of my reviewers that I work with have come through for me and done reviews in 3 days in an emergency situation. So that might also happen. And if you sense that an editor is in a jam, help out, because things happen like these, and then they will remember you after that.
Yeah.
So I've heard a bunch of things. Obviously, the most important thing is do good reviews on time, consistently. The journals are looking to promote people who have a consistent pattern of helping in the review process. And I've also heard part of it is also getting published yourself, and part of it is giving presentations at conferences, because that tends to make you more visible and more salient to people because they remember seeing you on stage. So these are all things that you can do to get noticed and networked. Let me ask, what happens when you have the opposite problem? I talked to a number of junior scholars who say, do you know how many review requests I get? And I'll tell you right now, editors tend to like to ask junior scholars because they have a feeling that junior scholars are more likely to say yes to a review request than senior scholars. I'm not really sure that's true because senior scholars do reviews as well. But so how do you balance this? How many reviews should junior scholars be doing? Because these things take time and take time away from research. So how do you manage the number? How do you graciously say no? When should you say yes? When should you say no? What advice would you have?
Let me start with that because early on in my career, my colleague Sav Devraj and I, when we were both starting out, agreed that for every paper that we submit, we will each review at least 2 papers. So that's the rule of thumb. And the reason for that algorithm was we counted the number of people who read our papers and give comments. And then we said, if each of us reviews at least 2 papers, we would have given back to the community what the community has given to us. Now that is something that doesn't always work. You might get more papers sometimes and fewer papers other times. But I very carefully evaluate the papers that I can review in a given time frame that often is in the review request itself, like you have 3 weeks. If I cannot deliver on time, I will get back to the editor and say, I cannot deliver on time. However, if I have extra 1 week or 2 weeks, I might be able to review, or I'm traveling, or I'm not available, I have a family event to go to, or something like that. I don't just say no with no reason attached to it. So if you have to say no, carefully say no, and help out if you can by giving names of other potential reviewers that you might know of that might be good for that. So that's one thing. I can always ask for extra time, but if I can't do a good job, then sometimes I will just have to say no and say, I'm just overcommitted at this time, but please keep me in mind the next time around.
Right. Yeah. So Rajiv took that one because I'm not really good at saying no.
Oh, good. Okay, now I know who to ask for reviews. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a character flaw. One of the hardest things that I had to do as an assistant professor was to decline a review from a senior scholar who I was friends with at the time. But I had to say no. I had 4 reviews on my desk. There was no way I was going to be able to do another one. I wrote and rewrote the email, I think 6 times, to make sure that I explained the reason and was appropriately apologetic. But I think the challenge is there's only so much time in the day, and you don't want to feel like you're spending more time on other people's research than your own. So you've got to come up with some sort of a balance. For some people, that's 1 a month. And I'm talking journal reviews. Conference reviews are different. The papers are shorter. The turnaround time is much quicker. But for journal reviews, some people can handle 1 a month. Some people, can handle 1 every other month. But the one thing that you want to be careful of is you don't want to be known as the person who always says no, right? You've always got an excuse. So again, that goes back to that. If you're going to reach out to somebody to say, I'm ready to review, you better be ready to review. But just as Rajiv said, explain the situation, offer suggestions. If you know people who could review the paper, go ahead and offer them. But just be respectful about it, and people will be fine when you say no.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to what you just said. Be polite and be reasonable. The automated assignment of reviews or reviewers has actually done disservice to the relationship between the editors and reviewers. Here's why I say that. It is so important. I realize why we do that, because it's automated, all the languages in there, and there's a button that says I accept or I decline. When that happens, it's very mechanical, and it's so easy for the person receiving to just click and say I decline, and then done, forget about it. And then you'll get an automated email saying, sorry, you could not do it, but hopefully you'll do it next time. The email is like a page long, and it comes within 30 seconds. Nobody wrote it for you. So when I do that, if I'm not able to review, I send another personal email to the editor saying, I have just declined it. Here is the reason I'm declining it. If you still like me to review, you'd have to give me a couple of weeks extra or keep me in mind the next time. But on the flip side, I'm asking you as reviewers not to treat that as a mechanical thing, impersonal thing. Think of that somebody has actually clicked a few buttons to invite you, and they've thought about you. So treat it as a personal email.
Yes.
So let me ask, I'm going to ask one more question before we go into breakout sessions around the table. I see one of the questions that has gotten the most votes, I'm going to rephrase. So very quickly, what are the most common mistakes that you see? In other words, as an author, it's just when you review a paper, what are the things that you see that the authors could have avoided? In short, snappy answer, if you can.
What the authors, sorry, I was going down a different path. What the authors could have done in their paper. I think
yes.
One thing that is very surface level that reviewers will react to negatively most of the time is if the paper has not been proofread. If you have any doubts whatsoever, I suggest you engage an editor, because if reviewers find problems in the first page or two, that's it. It has changed their mental attitude toward the paper, and it really hurts it significantly.
And
and that's a really simple fix at this point
it
with all the services
in a number
online.
of ways.
Rajiv?
They will form an opinion of the paper or lack of work that went into the paper. And then they'll treat the rest of the paper just, subconsciously the same way, but they'll never say that I don't like this paper because you haven't put enough time in it. So that's a very important point. Other couple points that I'd like to make why reviewers may not like a paper. One is that the authors have not clearly stated what is the problem that they're trying to address. Just because they found some data and analyzed it is not enough for them to say this is a good paper. The second is misunderstanding of the literature that they are citing. So just sometimes just basic misunderstanding where they will say this has not been done, and there's probably 15 references of papers that have addressed that issue. So when that happens early on, where the paper is not problematized and basic misunderstanding of the literature, then you know that they're not paying attention to the rest of the paper because they don't think it's important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On that note, I'm going to suggest we move into breakout sessions around the tables. Please come back at 5 minutes to the hour for some closing remarks from Sue and Rajiv and update about the next session. So